Social media has become the ultimate stage for post-breakup emotions. It's where people go to vent, seek validation, and most importantly, subtly, or not so subtly, get the attention of someone they're no longer in contact with. If your ex is hurting during no contact, one of the biggest giveaways is how they behave online. The once normal and casual posting style might shift dramatically, revealing more than they intend to. One of the first things you might notice is an increase in emotional or cryptic posts. Suddenly, their feed is filled with deep song lyrics, sad quotes, or reflective captions that scream heartbreak. They might post something like, "Funny how life changes so quickly," or "Some people are just lessons, not blessings." It's vague enough that they can deny it's about you, but personal enough to make you wonder. This kind of post is a classic phishing technique designed to see if you'll react, comment, or even reach out. And then there's the accidental engagement with your content. Maybe they haven't liked one of your posts in months, but out of nowhere they double tap on an old picture of you two at a concert or a selfie you posted weeks ago. Maybe they even watch your Instagram stories the second you post them. If they were truly over it, they wouldn't be keeping such close tabs on your social media life. Sometimes they'll go as far as unfollowing you to prove a point, only to follow you again later, creating an emotional push and pull game. Another clear sign is the dramatic shift in their own content. If they used to post once in a while but are now flooding their feed with selfies, gym pictures, or having the time of my life party snaps, it's likely not just about personal growth. It's about making sure you see what you're missing. They might suddenly start posting about activities they never cared about before, things they know would grab your attention. If they know you always wanted them to travel more and now their feed is filled with spontaneous trips, that's a sign. Stories and reels become another major tool for indirect communication. Maybe they post a throwback to a song you both loved or a clip of a romantic scene from a movie you always watched together. It's subtle but intentional. If you see this happening, it's because they're hoping you'll pick up on the hidden message and feel something, nostalgia, regret, or the urge to break the silence. And then there's the ultimate move, the mysterious presence of a new person in their posts. Sometimes an ex will post pictures or stories with someone new, not necessarily because they've moved on, but because they want you to think they have. The strategic placement of another person in a picture, the ambiguous caption like "good times with great people," or the tagging of someone attractive with no context. It's all part of the psychology of making you wonder. The reality, if they truly didn't care, they wouldn't feel the need to showcase it so loudly. The digital world gives people a way to say everything without actually saying anything. If your ex is behaving strangely online, posting differently, engaging with you unexpectedly, or making indirect attempts to get your attention, it's a strong sign that they are struggling with the breakup. While no contact is meant for healing, many people can't help but try to fill the void with social media games, hoping for a reaction or validation. At the end of the day, actions speak louder than words, or in this case, posts speak louder than direct messages. One of the biggest giveaways that your ex is hurting during no contact is when mutual friends suddenly become messengers, intentionally or unintentionally relaying information between the two of you. If your ex is truly over it, they won't feel the need to ask about you or gather details about your life through shared connections. But if they're struggling with the breakup, they might use these mutual friends as a way to stay connected without breaking the no contact rule themselves. It usually starts subtly. A friend might casually mention, "Hey, I ran into your ex the other day and they asked how you were doing." At first it seems innocent, but if your ex is repeatedly checking in on you through different friends, it's a clear sign they still care. They may phrase their questions in a way that doesn't make it obvious, like asking about your job, family, or even if you've been going out a lot. They're fishing for information without having to reach out directly. In some cases, mutual friends will tell you outright that your ex was asking about you. So, was wondering if you're seeing anyone, or they seemed kind of down when we talked about you. These little insights reveal what's really going on behind the scenes. If they didn't care, they wouldn't be bringing you up in conversation at all. The fact that they are means you're still on their mind. Another thing to look out for is how mutual friends react when talking about your ex. If they suddenly start dropping hints about how your ex is struggling, missing you, or regretting the breakup, chances are they're relaying a message, whether they realize it or not. Sometimes an ex will even ask friends to subtly plant certain thoughts in your head. They might say something like, "Yeah, they've been going through a rough time," or "They said they've been thinking a lot about what happened." These comments are meant to test the waters to see if you still care and maybe even to push you into making the first move. Then there's the direct approach, when your ex actually uses a mutual friend to deliver a message. Maybe they don't want to break no contact themselves, so they'll have a friend say something like, "Hey, I don't know if I should tell you this, but really regrets how things ended." It's a way of reaching out without fully committing to it. They might not be ready to have a full conversation, but they still want you to know they're hurting. You might also notice mutual friends suddenly becoming more interested in your dating life. If a friend you haven't talked to in a while randomly asks, "So, are you seeing anyone new?" there's a good chance your ex put them up to it. They want to know if you've moved on, if they still have a chance, or if they should start preparing themselves for the idea of you with someone else. And then there are the spies, the friends who act neutral but are really team your ex. They might pretend to just be catching up with you, only to report everything back to your ex. If a friend suddenly starts digging for personal details, asking about your feelings or if you'd ever take your ex back, be careful. They might not have bad intentions, but they're playing the role of an unintentional or intentional go-behoover. At the end of the day, if mutual friends keep bringing up your ex, it's because your ex keeps bringing up you. No contact is meant to create space and clarity, but when someone is hurting, they find indirect ways to stay connected. If your ex is using friends to check in, it's because they're struggling with the silence, and deep down, they're hoping you might still care too. There's something about late nights and a few drinks that make emotions impossible to ignore. If your ex is truly hurting during no contact, one of the biggest giveaways is when they start reaching out in those vulnerable moments, especially through drunk texts or late night calls. It's a classic sign that they haven't fully moved on, and despite their best efforts to stay silent, their feelings get the best of them when their guard is down. At some point, you might get a random notification at 2 a.m., you see their name pop up, and for a second, your heart races. It could be a simple, "Hey," or maybe they go straight for something deeper, like, "I miss you." Either way, the timing says everything. If someone truly didn't care anymore, they wouldn't be reaching out in the middle of the night when emotions run high. Late night texts, especially the ones sent after a few drinks, are almost always fueled by nostalgia, loneliness, and unresolved feelings. Alcohol has a way of lowering inhibitions and making people say things they might not admit when they're sober. It quiets the logical part of the brain that says, "Don't reach out, stay strong." Instead, it amplifies emotions, making them feel the weight of missing you even more intensely. That's why drunk texts are rarely just random. They come from a place of suppressed feelings that surface when distractions aren't enough to keep them occupied. Sometimes the messages are messy and confusing. They might text something cryptic like, "Do you ever think about us?" or "I made a mistake." Other times it's completely incoherent, filled with typos, or just a simple "hey" that they hope will be enough to start a conversation. If they're really deep in their feelings, they might even send a long emotional paragraph about how much they miss you, how they regret everything, or how they just needed to hear your voice. And then there are the classic missed calls. Multiple rings in the middle of the night, only for them to disappear by morning. They might call once and hang up, hoping you'll be the one to text back, or they'll call repeatedly, leaving voicemails that range from sentimental to outright embarrassing. The next morning, they might pretend it never happened, or they'll follow up with a casual, "Sorry, I was drunk." But the truth is, drunk words are often sober thoughts. If they reach out in this way, it means that despite all their attempts to move on, the feelings are still there. Maybe they've been holding back, trying to stay strong during no contact, but in those late night moments when distractions fade and reality sets in, their emotions take over. It's a moment of weakness that reveals what they've been trying to hide. They're hurting just as much as you are. Some people wake up the next morning and pretend it never happened. They might delete the messages before you even see them, or if you do, they might brush it off like it was nothing. But don't be fooled. If they're drunk texting or calling, they're feeling something real. They might not have the courage to say it in daylight, but the truth comes out when their mind is unfiltered. Of course, the big question is, should you respond? That depends on what you want. If you're looking to move on, ignoring it is the best option because engaging could reopen wounds or give them false hope. But if you still care, it's up to you to decide whether their late night vulnerability is something worth exploring or just a temporary moment of weakness. At the end of the day, drunk texts and late night calls are a huge sign that your ex is struggling. They might not be able to admit it when the sun is up, but when they're alone with their thoughts, you're still the first person on their mind. You're going about your day, minding your own business, when suddenly, boom, you run into your ex. Maybe it's at your favorite coffee shop, the gym, a concert, or even the grocery store. At first you might think, wow, what a small world, but if it starts happening more than once or in places where you used to go together, it's probably not a coincidence. One of the biggest signs that your ex is struggling during no contact is when they start appearing in places where they know they might see you. It's their way of trying to stay connected without actually reaching out. They know that texting or calling would break the no contact rule, so instead they place themselves in situations where accidentally bumping into you feels organic, even though in reality it's completely intentional. It usually starts subtly. Maybe you told them you always grab coffee at a specific spot in the mornings and suddenly they're there too. Or they know you hit the gym at a certain time and now they've magically switched their workout schedule. At first they might act surprised as if they had no idea you'd be there. Oh, wow, fancy seeing you here. They'll say with a casual smile as if they weren't hoping to run into you the entire time. But here's the real giveaway. If they're truly over you, they wouldn't be going out of their way to be in the same place as you are. People don't just change their routines overnight unless there's a reason. And if you're noticing that your ex is suddenly showing up in familiar places, chances are they're looking for an excuse to see you. Sometimes they might even involve mutual friends to make the coincidence seem more natural. If they know you're going to a party or an event, they'll find a way to be there too. Maybe they weren't even invited, but somehow they managed to show up. And when they do, they'll make sure you see them, maybe by laughing a little too loudly, making a grand entrance, or conveniently placing themselves in your line of sight. Another classic move is when they start frequenting places they never used to care about before. Maybe you always loved a certain bookstore, but they never showed any interest, until now. Suddenly, they're browsing the same aisles, hoping for a moment where your eyes meet and you start talking again. Or they're posting Instagram stories from your favorite park, knowing you might see it and wonder if it's a sign. Even their body language can give them away. If they're truly just there by chance, they'll act naturally, but if they're lingering, glancing at you, or making small efforts to get your attention, like accidentally walking past you multiple times or taking forever to leave, it's a clear indicator that they're trying to reconnect, even if it's just indirectly. What's interesting is that when you do run into them, they'll often act like they're totally fine. They might try to appear confident, looking their best, or even talking loudly about how great life has been, but underneath the surface, there's a reason they're there. People who have truly moved on don't need to position themselves in places where their ex might be. They focus on their own path instead of looking for ways to cross yours. So, what should you do if this keeps happening? It depends on what you want. If you're also hoping to reconnect, this could be a way for both of you to ease back into talking. But But if you're trying to move on, the best thing to do is acknowledge it, stay polite, but keep your boundaries firm. If they're showing up intentionally, it means they're struggling with the breakup and they're hoping you'll notice. The question is, will you? After a breakup, one of the biggest signs that your ex is hurting during no contact is when they suddenly go through a dramatic transformation, physically, emotionally, or even socially. It's called the glow up. And while some people genuinely work on themselves for personal growth, others do it with one specific goal in mind: to make you notice. At first, you might see little changes. Maybe they start hitting the gym more, dressing better, or putting extra effort into their appearance. If they were never into fitness before, but now they're posting gym selfies every day, it's probably not just about getting healthier. It's about showing you what you're missing. They want you to wonder, why didn't they do this when we were together? And more importantly, who are they trying to impress now? Social media is where this glow up is usually on full display. Suddenly their posts go from casual and infrequent to perfectly curated and frequent. They start uploading mirror selfies, vacation pictures, or living my best lifestyle content. Maybe they used to be a private person, but now they're constantly sharing everything they do. They want to create the illusion that they're thriving without you, even if deep down they're still struggling. Another clear sign is when their confidence levels seem to skyrocket overnight. If they were shy or introverted before, but now they're suddenly outgoing, social, and adventurous, it's often a way to show you and themselves that they're doing just fine. They might start saying yes to things they used to avoid, like spontaneous trips, parties, or even extreme makeovers. The goal? To appear happier, more exciting, and more desirable than ever before. Sometimes the glow up isn't just physical, it's also about success and ambition. Maybe they throw themselves into work, start a new business, or suddenly get serious about their goals. If they used to be laid back about their career, but now they're constantly grinding and posting about their accomplishments, there's a chance they're doing it to prove something to you, to themselves, or even to people around them who knew about the breakup. One of the most obvious ways an ex tries to show off their glow up is by surrounding themselves with new people. Especially if those people are attractive or popular, they might start hanging out with a new crowd, going out more, or even posting pictures with potential romantic interests. Whether or not they're actually dating someone new, the message is clear. Look, I've moved on. Have you? But the truth is, if they really didn't care anymore, they wouldn't feel the need to flaunt it. Then there's the classic glow-up encounter. This happens when they go out of their way to make sure you see the new and improved version of them, whether in person or online. Maybe they accidentally bump into you looking their absolute best, or they start showing up in your social circles again just to remind you of what you lost. If they really weren't affected by the breakup, they wouldn't care whether you noticed their transformation or not. At the core of it, a glow up after a breakup can be healthy. It's good to focus on self-improvement, but when it's driven by a need for validation or a desire to make you jealous, it's a strong sign that your ex isn't as over it as they pretend to be. The biggest giveaway, if they're still watching your stories, liking your posts, or making sure you see how much they've changed. If they truly didn't care, they wouldn't need an audience for their glow up. So, what should you do if you notice this happening? If you're trying to move on, the best thing you can do is not react. If they're glowing up for you, they're waiting for you to acknowledge it. But the most powerful move, let them wonder if you even noticed at all. One of the biggest signs that your ex is actually hurting during no contact is when they go out of their way to act like they're completely over it. Almost too hard. Instead of simply moving on naturally, they make a point to show the world and you that they're thriving, even if deep down they're still struggling. When someone is genuinely healed from a breakup, they don't feel the need to constantly prove it. But when an ex is hurting, they often overcompensate, creating a carefully curated illusion of happiness. A classic example is the sudden shift in their social media behavior. If they were never the type to post much before, but now their feed is filled with pictures of them laughing, partying, traveling, or living their best life, it's not just a coincidence. They want you to see how well they're doing without you, even if it's all an act. The captions might be extra positive, full of motivational quotes or cryptic messages like everything happens for a reason or new beginnings, no regrets. But in reality, these kinds of posts often signal that they're still processing the breakup. And then there's the exaggerated dating life. If your ex starts making it obvious that they're going out on dates, flirting publicly, or even showing off a rebound relationship, it might not be as genuine as it seems. They could be doing it to make you jealous or to convince themselves that they've moved on. Real moving on doesn't require an audience, but when someone is hurting, they might use a new relationship or the appearance of one as a way to distract themselves from the pain. Another major sign is when they act too indifferent when your name comes up. If mutual friends mention you and your ex goes out of their way to act like they don't care, that's a red flag. Instead of a natural, neutral response, they might say something like, "Oh, I don't even think about them anymore," or "I'm so much better off now." When someone has truly moved on, they don't feel the need to emphasize it, but when they're still hurting, they might overdo it just to convince themselves and everyone else that they're fine. Sometimes this extreme detachment comes in the form of cutting off all connections. If your ex suddenly unfollows you on social media, deletes all your pictures together, and avoids mutual friends, it could be a sign that they're struggling to cope. Of course, some people genuinely need distance to heal, but if they were fine with keeping things civil at first and then abruptly erase every trace of you, it might mean that no contact is getting to them more than they expected. Their behavior in social settings can also give them away. If you run into them at a party, event, or even by accident, they might try to act too nonchalant. Maybe they'll ignore you completely, laugh a little louder, or go out of their way to be overly friendly with other people. The goal is to make it seem like they're not affected at all, but in reality, if they were truly over it, they wouldn't feel the need to put on a performance. And then there's the sudden life transformation. While it's normal for people to make changes after a breakup, some exes go into overdrive, trying to become a completely new person overnight. They might pick up a brand new hobby, completely change their look, or suddenly act like they have a whole new personality. While self-improvement is great, if the changes seem forced or out of character, it could be their way of trying to fill the void left by the relationship. At the end of the day, actions speak louder than words. If your ex is truly over it, they won't feel the need to constantly prove it, but when someone is hurting, they'll go out of their way to make it look like they've moved on, even when they haven't. And that's when you know no contact is working and they're feeling it more than they'd ever admit.